I hope you found places to park in the ramp. It's been a challenge this evening. I apologize for any inconvenience. It is my pleasure, on behalf of President Joffre and all my colleagues at Iowa State University, to welcome you to the 4th Annual Manatt Phelps Lecture in Political Science. The annual fall lectures focus on significant developments in international political economy during the previous year. The purpose is to stimulate discussions on how politics and economics affect one another and how these issues are transnational in scope. This annual Manatt Phelps Lecture in Political Science was established by Ambassador Charles Manatt and Kathleen Manatt, both alums of Iowa State University, and Thomas Phelps, also an alum of Iowa State, and Elizabeth Phelps. Thomas Phelps and Charles Manatt are the founders of the Manatt, Phelps, and Phillips law firm. Ambassador Manatt served as chair of the Democratic National Committee, 1981-85, U.S. Ambassador to the Dominican Republic, 1999 to 2001, as chair of the Clinton-Gore campaign in 1992, among many other positions. Ambassador Manatt also served as the first Manatt Phelps Lecturer in 2002. Mr. Phelps has led Manatt, Phelps, and Phillips to national and international prominence in providing legal services to financial, energy, healthcare, entertainment, telecommunications, technology, retail, and manufacturing industries. The Manatts and Phelps have also made a commitment to create the Manatt Phelps Endowed Chair in International Political Economy and the Department of Political Science. It was their vision, and it's through their financial support, that this extremely important lecture series is now housed at Iowa State University. It doesn't take a reading of the book The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman to understand the importance of this lecture series. Please join me in acknowledging these 4 very important people to Iowa State University. We have had 3 outstanding lectures in this program, and this year's lecture is no exception. It is my pleasure to introduce Mike Whiteford, Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, who will introduce tonight's speaker. Dean Whiteford, who earned his PhD from the University of California, Berkeley in 1972, was named Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in 2004. He has had more than 30 years of experience here at Iowa State University as a professor of anthropology, as a department chair, and as an associate dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. It is my pleasure to introduce Mike Whiteford.
And good evening. Let me join the provost in thanking Elizabeth and Tom Phelps and Kathleen and Charles Manatt for sponsoring this wonderful lecture series. This is truly a remarkable event, and we want to make sure that you know just how much we appreciate both the support of this event and having you join us every year to kick it off. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are honored to have Nebraska's senior U.S. Senator Chuck Hagel as the 4th Annual Manatt Phelps Lecture in Political Science. As you were told moments ago, the Manatt Phelps Lecture Series focuses on international issues, particularly in the arena of political economy. As the chair of the Senate's Foreign Relations International Economic Policy, Export and Trade Promotion Subcommittee, and the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Hagel is an ideal candidate to deliver this year's address. Senator, we thank you for taking your time to visit with us this evening. A Midwesterner and undoubtedly no stranger to Iowa, Senator Hagel has deep Nebraska roots and, as we found out this evening, deep Iowa roots as well, going back more than 4 generations. The senator was born in North Pratt, Nebraska, but he spent many of his formative years on the Nebraska-Iowa frontier, graduating from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and then working as a newscaster and talk show host with radio stations KBON and KLNG in Omaha, Nebraska. Senator Hagel is a decorated Vietnam veteran, an experience one can see from his resume that has helped shape his own life over the past 3 decades. Serving in this country's military at a time in our nation's history which was very important, undoubtedly has given him a special lens for looking at and understanding a number of international issues that the country is facing today. If you look carefully at our program, you'll see that the Center is never at a loss for things to do. In particular, his service as a board or advisory committee member for the Institute of Politics at Harvard University. He is on the German Marshall Fund's Trade and Poverty Forum. He has worked for the Eisenhower World Affairs Institute and for Bread for the World and for the Council on International Relations, among other things. All of these boards and committees are beneficiaries of a worldview that was taking shape while a young soldier thousands of miles away from the American heartland was fighting for our nation's defense. Senator Hagel has received countless awards that reflect a tenacious commitment to advancing the public good. Among his most recent accolades are the 2005 Marlin Fitzwater Excellence in Public Service Communication Award, the 2005 Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars Public Service Award, the 2005 American Association of School Administrators Champion of Children Award, a 2004 Edmund S. Muskie Distinguished Public Service Award, the Atlantic Council's 2004 Award for Distinguished International Leadership. Senator Hagel, we welcome you this evening to the campus of Iowa State University, and we look forward to your remarks. Thank you.
Being an old radio man, I don't want to cut out any radio action here. I actually worked for KRCB in Council Bluffs, Iowa. I'm not sure that has anything to do with tonight, but nonetheless, Dean, thank you. First, let me thank Iowa State University for allowing me an opportunity to share some thoughts with you tonight. My friend, Ambassador Chuck Manette, thank you. Tom Phelps, thank you as well for your sponsorship. What you are doing in helping prepare our young citizens to face a new competitive world is important. And both of you have been at that for many, many years, and I don't know of anything more important, as we all appreciate, than accomplishing that preparation and helping in that process for our young people. I also am grateful that you have taken an ecumenical approach to inviting a Republican to come share the stage with you tonight, and I would look forward to whatever assessments of my remarks that you would keep private and would not state those publicly. I want to also acknowledge our Dean and Provost here tonight for your good work and efforts and for what you continue to do for this institution. And I'm not unmindful of the effectiveness of Iowa State. In putting it in more parochial terms, I saw that displayed in 2 overtimes with Nebraska Cornhuskers. God was a Cornhusker that night, but he wasn't last night, however. Congratulations, by the way, on the Cyclone victory. I also appreciate my colleagues, Senators Harkin and Grassley in Washington. I have a good and close relationship with each. They are effective, and I am most grateful that they would allow me a visa to come to their state tonight, assuring them that I should not embarrass either one. Grassley was particularly concerned about that. I Also want to acknowledge the dinner tonight, which was exquisite, really. Obviously, the beef was from Nebraska in my honor. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Not often an unworthy Cornhusker gets 2 desserts. Right, Beth? Thank you. They gave me 2 desserts tonight. So thank you all for coming, and the students who are here tonight. And I know we'll have an opportunity to exchange some thoughts here after my remarks, and I look forward to your comments, questions, commentary, insults, whatever you'd like to exchange. Ladies and gentlemen, more than 200 years ago, a group of exceptional individuals set upon a perilous and uncertain course in a land that would become the United States of America. They had a purpose to their lives and a vision of liberty, with a free sense, and that vision included a life free from tyranny, where industry, not privilege, would determine one's future. These free-thinking people were imbued by a sense of fair play and religious and social tolerance. They possessed the spirit that history had never before seen. They went about building a new land of hope and opportunity. Our founders were imperfect. Slavery and the treatment of Native Americans were 2 blights on this new land, and this legacy remains with us today. But our founders, imperfect as they were, built for this nation the sturdy foundation for a democratic and vibrant society that has prospered since its creation. Today, just as it was over 200 years ago, we live at a time of historic transformation. We are defining our future. The world is confronted with a universe of challenges, threats, and opportunities unlike any we have ever seen before. In a 21st century global community, all leaders of all institutions will be faced with more uncontrollables than ever before in their efforts to govern and lead. This will require a 21st century frame of reference. The margins of error for miscalculation will be less than ever before. The 24-hour news cycle that dominates our lives and the rate and intensity of change complicates leadership, governance, and society. There is today greater diffusion of economic power and global access to information, meaning newfound global economic power, than ever before. This is a critical time for responsible governance. This is a time for hard choices and difficult decisions. This will require courageous, informed, and wise leadership. Maintaining America's competitive position in the global economy demands that we begin to inventory and address the first-order challenges in our country, such as trade, energy, deficit federal spending, entitlement programs, infrastructure, education, immigration, and foreign policy. We are only beginning to understand the scope and complexity of the threats from terrorism and Islamic extremism, pandemic health outbreaks, endemic poverty, environmental crises, and cycles of despair. Allies and international institutions will be essential to our successful engagement of these threats. Today, we see some parallels to the period following World War II. Now as then, the world is in the midst of adjusting to the new challenges of our time. After World War II, the United States and its allies created organizations of global benefit and common purpose, such as the United Nations, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, NATO, and the World Bank. These institutions and alliances are as vital today as when they were formed. They need constant adjustment and calibration. They need that adjustment and calibration to stay relevant to today's world. What remains unchanged is the critical importance of these institutions, alliances, and relationships to achieve global security, stability, and prosperity. As Mel Laird, former Secretary of Defense under President Nixon, writes in Foreign Affairs, quote, "Our pattern of fighting our battles alone or with a marginal coalition of the willing contributes to the downward spiral in resources and money." Ironically, Nixon had the answer back in 1969. At the heart of the Nixon Doctrine, announced that first year of his presidency, was the belief that the United States could not go it alone. As he said in his foreign policy report to Congress on February 18, 1970, the United States will participate in the defense and development of allies and friends. But America cannot and will not conceive all the plans, design all the programs, execute all the decisions, and undertake all the defenses of the free nations of the world. We will help where it makes a real difference and is considered in our interest. 3 decades later, we have fallen into a pattern of neglecting our treaty alliances, such as NATO, and endangering the aid we can give our allies by throwing our resources into fights that our allies refuse to join. Vietnam was just such a fight, and so was Iraq. If our treaty alliances were adequately tended to and shored up, and here I include the UN, we would not have so much trouble persuading others to join us when our cause is just. Still, as the only superpower, there will be times when we must go it alone. These were the words of former Secretary of Defense Mel Laird. At the core of America's success has been America's economic freedom and flexibility anchored by the rule of law. These central elements will remain indispensable for our future. Economic power. Economic power is the power that allows a nation options and opportunities. America needs to prepare itself for a period of global uncertainty and complexity. We are witnessing this reality being played out today with the great upheavals of American corporate giants like General Motors, Delphi Corporation, the major airlines, and others. Technology, productivity, and markets will continue to drive global economic dislocation. No nation will be spared from this phenomenon. Americans must welcome this new global competition, not cower from it. This global development represents more opportunities for America's consumers, businesses, and investors than ever before. Trade is an essential part of our prosperity today and will be even more so in the future. It has been the engine of growth, innovation, wealth, and job creation in the United States and the world since World War II. Between 1948 and 2001, world exports rose from $58 billion to almost $6 trillion, and tariffs fell from an average of 40% to 4%. We are challenged today by a world that is more competitive than ever before in history. Consider the fact that just 20 years ago, China, Russia, Eastern Europe, and India were not even in the global trading system. Between 1984 and 2004, American exports of goods and services rose from $291 billion to over $1.2 trillion. And during the last 20 years, the U.S. has seen employment rise from around 105 million workers in 1984 to nearly 140 million workers today. Free trade agreements, such as NAFTA, CAFTA, and bilateral free trade agreements with Singapore, Chile, Jordan, Morocco, and Australia help keep and create new opportunities around the globe. The upcoming Doha round in Hong Kong this December will be another important milestone, not only in U.S. trade policy, but world trade policy to continue the process of greater market liberalization. America's openness to foreign direct investment has also been vital to our economy. The world sees the U.S. as a stable and profitable place to invest. In 2004, new foreign investment in the U.S. was almost $80 billion, up 26% from the year before. But there is a dangerous protectionist streak growing in both of America's political parties. This protectionist streak may jeopardize our ability to remain competitively engaged in the world. We cannot let the challenges of the new global economy draw us inward in a senseless retreat from the world. To do so flies in the face of our own best interests. To retreat behind a wall of trade protectionism would be dangerously misguided and disastrous for America and the world. That course has been tried before, with devastating consequences. Global competition sharpens and improves productivity, and enhances standards of living worldwide. Increased productivity and a flexible economy have kept America the economic envy of the world. The global economic integration of the past 6 decades has also contributed to world stability, as more people in more nations have emerged from poverty. As standards of living rise, people become more invested in the future of their countries and in the guarantors of their future: human rights, democracy, rule of law, and transparent governance. But for many around the world, these economic enhancements have remained out of reach. Still today, the majority of the world's 7 billion people live in developing or underdeveloped countries. This economic fragility remains a key threat to global stability and the rule of law. It is in America's interests that countries such as China, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Ukraine grow and prosper. The challenge of widening the reach of economic prosperity will be one of the great tasks of the 21st century. Energy and security interests drive global economics and reflect the interconnections of a global society. Energy security, particularly in light of the recent tightening of world energy markets, requires greater diversification of energy sources. This includes bringing new hydrocarbon reserves to market and devoting more research and resources to development of renewable and alternate sources of energy, as well as expanded use of nuclear. America will require a wider and deeper portfolio of energy sources, as well as a more efficient use of our energy. A comprehensive strategic energy policy must be integrated into America's foreign policy. To fully seize the opportunities of today's global economy and maintain America's competitive position in the world requires a national consensus of purpose. Every generation of Americans has contributed to making a better world than the one they inherited. Each successive generation of Americans has been bequeathed more opportunities and better preparation than the past generation. Preparing America's next generation is critical for America's future. Part of that preparation is personal responsibility, education, and social discipline. To succeed today, just as has always been the case, we must prepare, work hard, be creative and productive, and invest wisely. The next generation of Americans has the ability to do more good for the world than any preceding generation, but it will have to earn that success. In the challenging and dynamic environment ahead of us, Americans will need to ask themselves some tough questions, like what is the role of government? How much government do they want? What do they want government to do for them? How much government are they willing to pay for? Who bears the responsibility for paying for government? The President and Congress must set a fiscal policy commensurate with the needs of the nation and the responsibility to tax and spend with a clear prioritization of resources. The fiscal year 2005 federal budget deficit was $312 billion. And in fiscal year 2004, the federal budget deficit was $420 billion. The Congressional Budget Office projects that 62% of our $2.6 trillion fiscal year 2006 budget will be obligated to mandatory spending. Most of that amount will go toward paying for 3 entitlement programs: Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And nearly $208 billion of that mandatory spending will go toward paying interest on our national debt, which is now $8 trillion. Our obligations abroad also come with a high financial cost. American operations in Iraq today cost from $5 to $6 billion a month, and monthly costs in Afghanistan are over $1 billion a month. If you include replacement costs for equipment and infrastructure, the monthly cost in Iraq is about $8 billion. The Congressional Research Service has calculated that America has spent nearly $360 billion so far in Iraq and Afghanistan. Sustained deficits erode the economic fundamentals of a country. Foreign investors, particularly China and Japan, have provided a majority of the capital that continues to finance our deficits and our national debt. This continued weakening of our economic base will have significant economic and national security implications for our future. We cannot continue to run up the national debt and burden future generations of Americans with huge government obligations that will impair their ability to compete and prosper. This will also limit our foreign policy options. We must make changes in Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or they will be unsustainable. Social Security is the most successful social program in the history of our country. I know a little something about that. When I was 16 years old, my father died. The Social Security benefits my mother received were critical in helping her raise 4 young boys. I well remember my mother's relief when that Social Security check arrived each month. We must remember that the first obligation of Social Security is to the most needy Americans. In 2017, Social Security will pay out more money than it takes in. By 2041, it will be insolvent. This is a jarring reality, but it is also one that can be fixed. I was the first United States Senator to introduce comprehensive Social Security reform legislation this year. The future insolvency of Social Security need not happen if leaders have the courage to address it now. Medicare and Medicaid are more difficult problems to solve because they have become so deeply interwoven into our country's health care system. Medicare drives health care today. We cannot address one piece of this without addressing the entirety. That's why, along with Democratic Representative John Tanner from Tennessee, I introduced a bill this month to create an independent, bipartisan commission charged with reviewing America's 3 major entitlement programs and making comprehensive recommendations to Congress to sustain the solvency and stability of these programs for the future. Over the next 75 years, these 3 programs represent a $42 trillion unfunded commitment and are on a trajectory that cannot be sustained. Our nation's infrastructure is another area that requires us to see beyond the horizon of the immediate to develop a sound, long-term economic policy for America. We need look no further than the failures of infrastructure in New Orleans to understand the importance and wisdom of investment in infrastructure. Airports, highways, bridges, ports, high-speed internet, and broadband are the lifeblood of our economy. Outdated infrastructure will erode our global competitiveness. These issues need to be addressed now, and there will be a cost for investing in them. This summer, we passed a much-needed highway bill. It was filled with too many special interest projects, but it also included funding for much-needed infrastructure enhancement. We also need to think creatively. Infrastructure capital account budgeting. That is now being used by other countries, such as New Zealand and the United Kingdom, to bring more accountability to government spending and investment in their public infrastructure. We need to explore these kinds of new initiatives. Today's leaders need to examine the way we are preparing our workforce to maintain its competitiveness. A panel created by the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Engineering issued a report this month that said U.S. science and mathematics education is lagging, and American students are not being readied for the gathering storm of foreign competition. We need to have a serious national debate about how we prepare for this growing storm. Recently, Gene Budig, a professor at Princeton University's Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs, a former chief executive of 3 universities, and former president of Major League Baseball's American League, wrote in the Omaha World Herald, and I quote, "The United States has a problem of epic proportions, one that is yet to register on the national radar screen. Its impact on our global competitiveness could be swift and chilling in the years ahead if it is not addressed in a careful and effective manner. Amazingly, 46% of the new people who enter elementary and secondary schools as teachers in America will leave the profession within 5 years. And about 40% of today's teachers, present-day teachers, have more than 20 years of service, meaning many are in a long gray line and are eligible to retire." End of quote. David Brooks, a nationally syndicated columnist, recently warned in the New York Times of the growing societal divide between those who go to college and those who do not. Brooks wrote, quote, "Only 28% of the American adults in this country have a college degree. But most of us in this group find ourselves in workplaces, in social milieus, where almost everybody has been to college. A social chasm is opening up between those in educated society and those in non-educated society. And you are beginning to see vast behavioral differences between the two groups." End of quote. I don't believe that massive federal involvement in education is the answer. No Child Left Behind, while well-intentioned, in my opinion, was fundamentally bad policy. The federal government is not equipped to manage education in America. Instead of focusing on slapping federal mandates down on states, we ought to be focused on increasing resources, access, and competition in our schools. The federal government can start by meeting its obligation, for example, to fully fund its commitment to the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA. If the federal government was meeting its legal commitment to IDEA, local school districts would have far more resources to spend on their additional local education priorities. I've worked very closely with your Senator Harkin, on this over the years. We need to prepare our workforce by being honest and realistic about the issue of immigration. Few issues in America today have been subject to as much overheated rhetoric and dishonest appeals to people's worst fears than immigration. The lawless crossing of our borders is a national security threat with which we must deal. No one can deny that. But that does not change the fact that there are 10 to 12 million people living and working in this country illegally. And no amount of talk show rhetoric and speech making will make that reality go away. We can confront this reality by putting in place a program to identify those who are here illegally, but are contributing to our society through work, family, faith, or any other measure of their industry, and put them on a path to earn legal status, while isolating those who are not here to strengthen our country. This month, I introduced 4 immigration reform bills that provide a comprehensive approach to this issue. We need to deal with the immigration issue now. It has immense implications for our society, our security, and our economy. There is a vital intangible that has been an essential building block for American prosperity and security for over 2 centuries, and that is America's leadership in the world. We have traditionally used our leadership to forge consensus on vital international issues, bringing together allies in common cause, addressing common challenges with common responses. And we have done so by building relationships, alliances, and international organizations that enhance our ability to influence and protect our national interests. These alliances have enhanced our power, not diminished it. The United States alone is incapable of confronting 21st century global threats and challenges. We must not unintentionally isolate ourselves in the world. Most recently, however, America has been perceived in the world as having turned away from its successful post-World War II multilateral approach. We are confronted today with the reality that trust and confidence in the United States has seriously eroded, and that our purpose and power are questioned and even opposed around the world. In the most recent edition of the New Yorker magazine, President George H.W. Bush's National Security Advisor, General Brent Scowcroft, discusses the state of the world and the challenges we face. We would be very wise to listen to General Scowcroft. He talks about the importance of, quote, weighing the consequences of alternative political actions, end of quote. We have failed to heed his counsel. Our inability to examine the possible consequences of our actions before we took them has put us in a precarious position in the world, especially in Iraq and the Middle East. America's decisions and actions regarding Iraq have isolated and alienated us from much of the world. But Iraq held a successful constitutional referendum on October 15th. Iraqi political parties are now preparing for parliamentary elections on December 15th, leading to the formation of a constitutionally based government. The success of this process will increasingly diminish the influence of the United States. Ultimately, success or failure in Iraq will be determined by Iraqis. We must recognize this dynamic and seize the opportunity over the coming months to act decisively to help strengthen regional and international support for Iraq. Once an Iraqi elected government is in place, the United States, along with its allies, should propose a regional security conference on Iraq with the endorsement of the United Nations. Creating this regional context is vital. Today, there is no mechanism for regional partners in the Middle East to develop consensus on building relationships around common security, political, and economic interests. The United States should take a secondary role and allow Iraq and its neighbors to lead this effort. Such a conference would give us another opportunity to help rebuild an international consensus on Iraq and address the regional complexities of the Middle East. More missed opportunities on Iraq will be disastrous for the U.S., Iraq, and the Middle East. As we consider the regional context of stability and security in Iraq, there is another issue that we must deal with: a relationship between the United States and Iran. The fact that our two governments cannot or will not sit down to exchange views must end. There will be no stability in the Middle East if Iran is excluded. Iran is a regional power. It has major influence in Iraq and throughout the Gulf region. Its support of terrorist organizations and the threat it poses to Israel is all the more reason that the U.S. should engage Iran. The United States is capable of engaging Iran in direct dialogue without sacrificing any of our interests or objectives. And any lasting solution to Iran's nuclear weapons program will require the United States direct discussions with Iran. Our military must remain an indispensable element of our power, but over-reliance on military power and the use of force will lead to deep problems for America. It is wrong and dangerous to place upon our military burdens which it cannot carry and objectives it cannot achieve. Without the strongest military in the world, America cannot remain secure, nor carry out its foreign policy. But our fundamental strength, America's fundamental strength, runs deeper than guns and bombs. The strength of America comes from its character. As President Kennedy said, and I quote, "I look forward to a future in which our country will match its military strength with our moral restraint, its wealth with our wisdom, its power with our purpose." End of quote. So as America prepares for its place in the 21st century, we are reminded that we are more than our military power and economic might. We are people rich in spirit, who have always believed in our country and its destiny. We are people who have been tempered by war, disappointment, and tragedy, but never without hope for a better world and a better tomorrow. Our country has never dwelt on the past nor yearned for a simpler time or a slower pace. There are great opportunities before us and great challenges before us. We can build a successful 21st century world on America's lasting foundational planks of tolerance and respect for others, entrepreneurism and risk-taking, courage and faith in each other, strong and imaginative leadership, coherent policies, and responsible politics and government will sustain our great nation. This is not an uncritical or arrogant America. This is an honest and invigorated America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Hagel, for that comprehensive assessment of the domestic and international challenges that we faced and how you link them together, which is exactly what the intent of this lecture series is about. On behalf of the Department of Political Science and our sponsors, Charles and Kathleen Manatt and Tom Tom and Elizabeth Phelps, I'd like to thank you for presenting the 4th Annual Manat Phelps Lecture in Political Science. We have certainly started a wonderful tradition here at Iowa State with these lectures over the past 3 years, and I think that your lecture very, very much continues that excellent tradition. Thank you very much
Jim,
again.
thank you very much. Glad to do it. Thank you.
Senator Hagel has agreed to answer a few questions, and I'd like to invite you to participate if you have a question for the senator. We have a microphone here in the middle aisle, so I'd invite you to step up to the microphone and ask your question so that all could hear. May I ask that you keep your questions succinct so that we might entertain as many questions as possible? The first question, please.
I'm sure this is on yet. I don't think this is on yet.
Michigan.
Senator Hagel, I'm Jim Hutter in the Political Science Department. I do want to welcome you to Ames, and I'm so glad that you're here. Let me preface my question briefly by saying you referred to the Iowa State-Nebraska football game, and I'm not so I saw that too, and I'm not so sure that God was on the side of Nebraska so much. It was half a dozen convicts. At least they were black and white striped uniforms.
That's a pitiful old excuse.
In 1994, a great many members of the Congress changed their parties from Democratic to Republican. Senator Morse did so in the 50s, and most recently Senator Jeffords has switched from Republican to Independent, caucusing with the Democrats. I'm not sure I heard in your speech tonight anything that marked you as particularly Republican or Democratic. Could you tell us what you think, from your perspective in the Senate, are the reasons a person should be a Republican or a Democrat, including yourself?
Thank you. First, I think political parties are very important because they represent an institutionalizing and crystallizing of a philosophy about government. Now, you pick what philosophy you believe and what you tend to move toward, and it's, I suspect for many people, it's developing as they go along. And that's why you have many split votes in the Congress that I don't believe I've ever seen in 9 years in the Senate, one member of the Senate vote a straight party line on every vote. Maybe there are, and maybe you're a political scientist, you can show me an example, but I've never seen it. But the fact is, political parties develop that political philosophy that then transcends the politics of the base philosophy and does what political parties are intended to do, and that is participate in a political process that elects leaders to govern. This business is about governance. And so whatever your political philosophy is that you subscribe to, that you think whatever party controls the Congress or the White House is better equipped, better able, philosophically, more competent, however way you judge it, to direct our policies and govern our nation, that's what this is about. That's what political parties are about. That's what the political process is about. And it's up to each individual to choose his or her own party based on their own philosophy. But I also think in political parties that, and this is a constant effort that you see in play, and the former chairman of the National Democratic Party could and has many times given lectures on this, is you see parties evolve. You see parties move in different directions. Bill Clinton in 1992 took the Democratic Party in a bit of a different direction than where the Democratic Party had been prior to that. And you again are the political scientist here, but what he did is he moved the Democratic Party back toward the center, the political center, in order to focus on governing, as well as just the raw political reality is that the extremes rarely get elected, and elections are normally fought in that vast middle ground of the electorate, and that's where they're normally won, in that middle ground. But political parties have a range and should have a range within their own philosophical base. As why I'm a Republican, I have believed that the Republican Party represents closer to my political philosophy about government on all areas of government. And there are times when I think and question whether I'm in the same party that I started out being in. I mean, the fact is that I'm in the Republican Party that's had the responsibility of governing our country the last 5 years, and we have presided over the largest building of government in modern history. The Democrats helped us, and didn't often complain, I might note. But the fact is that was under Republican government, and so you will see as we move toward 2008 within both parties a struggle to take the parties in different directions. If you look at the vast group of candidates who've been mentioned as presidential candidates in both Democratic and Republican parties, you'll see some philosophical differences within those two groups, the Democrats and the Republicans. And so leadership always in the end carries the day for any institution. And I think that's a part of it. But the base political philosophy of a party, as it shifts and goes back and forth, is what you generally look to. And even though I have a very strong Republican support percentage of voting for Republican issues in the Senate, it's one of the highest, matter of fact, in my caucus, one of the highest in support of President Bush's initiatives in the Senate. Doesn't mean I agree all the time with my party on specific issues or my president. And last thing I would say is that I have believed that my first responsibility is to the Constitution and to this country as an elected official, not to my party or not to a president. I take an oath of office to the Constitution as every elected official does. And there's nothing in that oath of office that says I swear allegiance to the Republican Party or President Bush or President XYZ. And that's how I do it. Now, it doesn't mean I'm right. Doesn't mean anybody else is wrong. But that's how I have come to be a Republican, why I'm a Republican. I'm disappointed in my party in some areas. I think we have failed this country in some areas. I think the Democrats have provided no alternatives to this country, either in leadership or ideas. And I think 2008 is going to be a very important year for this country, and I think both parties will rise to the occasion. And I think you will find in 2008 a very different kind of presidential election than we saw last November from both parties.
Thank you, Senator. First of all, I want to thank you for your support of the energy bill and ethanol. That's a great thing for this state. And second of all, earlier this summer, you made some comments about the Iraq War and that were aired on Al Jazeera. And I know you got a lot of flack from the right about that. And coming from the state of Nebraska, which is pretty red in terms of the 2004 election, how do you balance in terms of public opinion, of your ideas, your personal thoughts with the thoughts of your constituents, and just kind of touch on what you think is, how much role does public opinion play in foreign policy? Mm-hmm. Thanks.
Well, it's a good question because you can apply that to every vote we cast. In the end, each elected official is responsible for his vote based on the judgment and the decision that you come to on an issue. I have said and believe that there is no more important an issue an elected official deals with in the Congress of the United States than the issue of war. I do not subscribe to some who believe that war is a political issue or a politically loyal loyalty issue. It's some kind of a litmus test for your party. If you believe, and hopefully you are informed enough to have an opinion, and I suspect I may be somewhat qualified on this. I actually did serve my country in combat. I actually do know a little something about war, not theory of war. I've served on the Foreign Relations Committee for 9 years, on the Intelligence Committee for 4 years. So I suspect I'm at least in the universe of maybe people knowledgeable about war, compared to some. So I come to the issue of Iraq, or committing young men and women to their deaths and the consequences of war, not on a political basis, or not on a public opinion basis, or not on what the polls say or my party thinks. I come to it on the decision that I have to make based on what I know, what I believe, and what I feel. And those who say, well, you shouldn't speak out against the war because it gives aid to the enemy, my comment on that is, are we really understanding what we're saying in a comment like that? Are we saying that the freest country in the history of man cannot publicly debate the most important issue that we will ever debate? Is that what we're saying? That we're not a strong enough country to deal with that? That we should be quiet? That we should cover up? I mean, my goodness, what kind of a people are we? Questioning a policy on war has nothing to do with supporting your troops. And so I think we have become a little mixed up on this issue. And I'll continue to just say it straight, and whatever it takes to be the best senator I can, and hopefully contribute to the future of this country and our national security, I'll continue to do that. And if it means I'm going against public opinion or people in Nebraska or my party or my president, I think that's just part of the responsibility of the job I have.
Hello, Senator Hagel. Welcome to Iowa State University. My name is Dinesh Shiragi. I am from India, an international student here, another burgeoning democratic power.
Yes.
The trend that came up in the 2004 general elections in India was the election of younger people to the parliament. And with regards to that, my question to you is, what advice do you have for young people who are aspiring for public office, say, especially with their perception of politics being a dirty business?
Well, first, I would strongly encourage any young person out there today to seriously consider some measure of public service. You don't all have to be president. You don't have to be senator or governor. But the essence of a democracy, the essence of who we are, is individual participation in the process. And you don't need all to be candidates to do that. But if you wanted to go further and you want to add more and contribute more, think seriously about that. As to the advice, a couple of very simple things. One, prepare yourself. And you prepare yourself by being aware of your surroundings, reading newspapers, knowing what's going on, understanding issues, reaching beyond maybe where you've ever reached. Listening to others, form some philosophy about government, some philosophy about something bigger and more important than your own self-interest. Examine yourself carefully as to why you would like to run for office. Is it because you're good looking and you're charming and articulate and it'd be fun? Well, I suppose that's not the worst reason, but it has to be better than that. You want to accomplish something with it. You want to do something with it. You want to improve your surroundings. You want to improve your country. You want to improve the lives of people. Something must be down there deep. There must be some purpose behind this. And if you can't find that, don't do it. You're wasting your time. You're wasting a lot of people's time. the other thing I would say is do a couple of things in your life first. Everybody does this differently. Now, I went to the Senate when I was 50 years old. I had never run for office before. Doesn't mean that my way is the best way, or we all do it differently. I mean, some of the finest people in government I've ever known are the ones that got out of college and ran for office. And 30 years are still there. And they're just as vital as a new person. But I think you need to bring something to the job. And I think because we all are products of our environment and our experiences and who we are, bring some value added to that job in the Congress. And whether it's the State House or wherever it is. And you do that by going out and doing a couple of things before you run for office. And again, I'm not arguing against half of you want to go run for office when you're out of college, do it. But I don't think for yourself and your country, you're giving everybody the best you got, and you can do a little more, and it gives you a perspective that you might not otherwise have. In the introduction tonight that the dean made, he mentioned my service in Vietnam that has given me maybe some perspective. Doesn't mean I'm right. I've been wrong many times. I'll be wrong a lot more. But it has given me a perspective, and that's just experience. Everybody in this room has had experiences, and some more than others. And you base decisions and judgments and everything on those experiences. And I would just make one last point, and it ties back a little bit to one of the other questions about my comments on Iraq. And again, courage. My friend John McCain has always talked about the indispensable element of anybody's life is courage. And I think he's got that about right. If you're not willing to have the courage to say things that you believe, then don't do it. And don't ever lose the courage. And don't ever lose that. You know, I think back more than occasionally, and which I stay in touch with a lot of friends of mine in Vietnam, some guys that had it pretty rough and have never been able to get put back together. Not all Vietnam still. But I think about where were the members of Congress during Vietnam? Where was any congressman or senator other than William J. Fulbright questioning the policy? There weren't many. So 58,000 dead later, hundreds of thousands maimed, and the worst humiliation this country has ever faced, because nobody was asking any questions. So have the courage to follow through. Yes.
I would just like to say that I think you're definitely right when you say questioning your government is one of the most important things you can do. I would like to ask you about, a quick question and then a longer question. When you were speaking...
How many questions you get? Are you a Manat or what? Are you related to...
When you were speaking just now at the lecture, did you once mention our the size of our imports over the years?
Current account deficits?
Yeah, trade deficits.
I did not specifically, but that's a big part of the problem.
I believe our imports have gone way up, have they not?
Yes, they have.
And are we not running a increasingly negative balance of trade?
Yes, we are.
What is the effect of free trade on that? I know I've read Friedman's column and stuff, like his opinions on this, and he says, much like you said, that we need to invest on competing with the world, but mm-hmm. I don't see how are we going to compete with the rest of the world when they'll pay their workers 20 cents an hour, and mm-hmm. how can we compete with them in that respect, trade wise, and also our increasing trade deficit with China. I think that kind of hinders us in many ways, and also I kind of don't like that, especially because China is not exactly the freest country in the world, and they are rising to a position of power. I remember in high school reading stuff that they are going to be the next world power, possibly even to surpass us. And I'm just wondering, what are we going to do about this trade deficit? And
can we solve this trade deficit problem while maintaining a free trade status?
Okay, let me stop you there because you